The house was glowing with warm lights, the kind meant to suggest celebration, but the air inside felt cold and brittle. The Korean Mafia boss moved through the living room without slowing, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and impatient. His suit was immaculate, his posture controlled, his attention fixed entirely on the woman speaking to him from the other end of the line. He didn't look back when his wife stepped out from the hallway. She stood there quietly holding a small gift box wrapped in pale paper. Her fingers trembled around it, not from fear, but from the weight of hope she had placed inside. She had waited all evening for this moment, rehearsing what she would say, telling herself that tonight might be different. Tonight maybe he would see her. "Just a minute," she said softly, not wanting to interrupt, only wanting to be noticed. He lifted one finger without turning around, a sharp, dismissive gesture. His voice dropped even lower, intimate in a way it hadn't been with her for months. She recognized that tone. It was the one he used when he was with his lover. The gift felt suddenly heavier in her hands. She took a step forward anyway. "I thought we could." He sighed, finally pulling the phone away from his ear long enough to glance at her. The look he gave her was quick, irritated, and empty of warmth. "I'm busy," he said. "Not now." Then he turned away again, already retreating into the conversation that mattered more. She stood frozen, watching his back as he walked toward the balcony doors. The glass reflected her image faintly. A woman trying not to cry, trying not to feel foolish for believing that effort still meant something. The ribbon on the gift slipped loose under her fingers. Memories crowded in without permission. Late nights waiting alone. Meals eaten cold. Conversations that ended before they began. She had told herself this was the cost of loving a powerful man. She had told herself she was strong enough to endure it. But tonight something cracked. She followed him to the balcony, rain starting to patter softly against the glass outside. "It won't take long," she said, her voice breaking despite her effort to keep it steady. "I just wanted to give you this." He covered the phone and turned sharply, annoyance flashing across his face. "Why do you always choose the worst moments?" he snapped. "Can't you see I'm dealing with something important? Something important. Not her. Never her." Her eyes filled, tears spilling despite her resolve. "I just wanted you to care," she whispered. He scoffed, a short, humorless sound. "You're crying over nothing again. You're too sensitive." The words landed harder than a slap. She stopped speaking. Slowly, carefully, she placed the gift on the small table near the door. For a moment she thought he might notice, might stop her. He didn't. He was already back on the phone, already laughing softly at something said by the woman on the other end. She turned away without another word. Outside, the rain had strengthened, falling in sheets that soaked the driveway and blurred the city lights beyond the gate. She didn't bother grabbing a coat. She walked until the house was behind her, until the sound of his voice was gone. Her car sat at the edge of the property, the engine still warm from earlier. She slid into the driver's seat, hands shaking as she started it. The gift box was still on the table inside. She hadn't even thought to bring it with her. The road stretched dark and slick ahead as she drove, tears blurring her vision. Her phone buzzed once in her lap. She didn't look at it. If he wanted her, he would have stopped her. If he cared, he would have followed. The rain came down harder, pounding against the windshield. Her chest tightened with every breath, emotions crashing together until she couldn't tell where heartbreak ended and panic began. She pulled over briefly, resting her forehead against the steering wheel, sobbing quietly. She told herself to breathe. She told herself she would be fine. She drove again, slower now, trying to focus on the road. A sharp turn appeared suddenly through the rain. The tires skidded. Her heart leapt into her throat as the car spun, metal screaming against the wet pavement. The impact came fast and brutal. Hours later, the house was silent except for the distant murmur of voices from the balcony. He ended the call, irritation fading into boredom as he stepped back inside. His eyes drifted to the small table near the door. The gift was still there. For a moment he frowned, a strange unease settling in his chest. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. His name was written on it in careful, familiar handwriting. His phone rang. He answered without thinking. "What is it now?" "This is the police," a calm voice said. "We found a phone on the side of the highway. It belongs to your wife." The world seemed to tilt. "What do you mean found?" he demanded. There's been an accident, the officer continued. We're still searching. We thought you should know. The gift slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a dull sound. His breath came fast and shallow as guilt slammed into him all at once. Her tears. Her silence. The way she had walked away. He realized too late that she hadn't been weak. She had been warning him. And now, for the first time, power meant nothing at all. He barely remembered grabbing his keys. One moment he was standing in the living room, staring at the crushed ribbon on the floor where the gift had fallen, and the next he was in his car, the engine roaring to life as if it could outrun the fear clawing up his spine. The city lights blurred past him as he drove too fast through streets he usually ruled with calm precision. Tonight, control had abandoned him. His phone lay on the passenger seat, screen dark, silent in a way that felt cruel. He replayed the officer's words over and over in his mind. Found her phone. Highway. Accident. Still searching. Still searching. The rain hadn't stopped. It hammered against the windshield, the same rain she had walked into while he stayed warm and distracted. Every red light felt like an insult. Every second stretched unbearably long. At the crash site, flashing lights cut through the darkness, painting the road in red and blue. He slammed the brakes and stepped out before the car had fully stopped. Officers turned, surprised, recognizing him immediately, their expressions shifting from authority to caution. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice rough, stripped of the composure that usually terrified men twice his size. An officer approached carefully. "Sir, we're doing everything we can." The car lost control in the rain and hit the barrier. There was no one inside when we arrived. No one inside. The words echoed hollowly. He pushed past them, ignoring protests, his shoes skidding on wet asphalt as he reached the wreck. The front of her car was crushed, glass scattered like broken stars across the road. The driver's door hung open. Her absence was louder than any scream. "Why wasn't she inside?" he snapped, panic seeping into anger. "How far has the area been searched?" "Several miles," another officer answered. "We've got units along the road and in the nearby woods. There's no sign of foul play yet, but..." "But what?" he barked. "But exposure is a concern," the officer finished gently. "It's cold. She could be disoriented. Disoriented. Alone. Hurt. Afraid." His chest tightened painfully. Images flooded his mind uninvited. Her standing in the rain, her hands shaking as she held that stupid little gift, the way her voice had cracked when she said she just wanted him to care. He had laughed. Mocked her tears. Told her she was too sensitive. The guilt was physical now, a crushing weight pressing down on his lungs. He stepped away from the wreck, raking a hand through his hair, rain soaking his suit, his tattoos darkening with water. Men feared him because he never broke. Tonight he felt close to shattering. "Expand the search," he said quietly, his voice suddenly deadly calm. "Use every resource. Call every unit. I want helicopters. Drones. Everything." The officers exchanged looks. They didn't need to be told who he was. Within minutes, the quiet stretch of highway transformed into organized chaos. Searchlights swept across trees and ditches. Radios crackled with voices calling out coordinates. He stood at the edge of it all, powerless for the first time in years. Time dragged. Every sound made his heart jump. Every passing minute tightened the knot in his chest. He imagined her calling his name into the darkness, her voice swallowed by rain. He imagined her sitting somewhere cold and scared, still waiting for him to show up. He deserved the pain ripping through him. His phone vibrated suddenly. He grabbed it instantly, hope flaring dangerously bright, then dimming when he saw the number. One of his men. "Sir," the man said carefully, "we found something. About half a mile down near the tree line." He didn't respond. He was already moving. They found her sitting on the ground beneath a cluster of trees, soaked to the bone. Her knees were pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she were trying to keep her body from falling apart. Mud streaked her jeans. Her hair clung wetly to her face. He was crying. Quietly. Exhaustedly. Still conscious. Relief hit him so hard his vision blurred. He dropped to his knees in front of her without thinking, ignoring the rain, the mud, the watching eyes. "Hey," he said hoarsely. "I'm here." Her head lifted slowly. When she saw him, something flickered in her eyes, Not relief, not gratitude, but disbelief. As if she wasn't sure he was real. "You came," she whispered, her voice raw. The accusation in those two words cut deeper than any knife. "Yes," he said, reaching for her, then stopping himself when she flinched. The hesitation killed him. "I'm here now." She laughed weakly, a broken sound. "That's what you said before." The words gutted him. "I know," he said quietly. "And I was wrong. About everything." Sirens approached in the distance. Paramedics hurried forward, kneeling beside them, checking her pulse, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She didn't resist, but her eyes never left his face. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, panic surged through him again. "I'm coming with you," he said immediately. At the hospital, the bright lights were unforgiving. They took her away before he could say another word, leaving him standing alone in wet clothes that suddenly felt too heavy. A nurse instructed him to wait. Wait. He sat down hard in a plastic chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His hands trembled. He didn't try to stop them. Memories replayed mercilessly. Every time she had asked for his attention. Every night she had gone to bed alone. Every tear he had dismissed as inconvenience. He had thought strength meant never yielding. Tonight taught him how wrong he was. Hours passed before a doctor finally approached. "She's stable," he said. "Mild concussion. Hypothermia. Severe emotional distress." Emotional distress. He nodded numbly. "Can I see her?" The doctor studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. She lay in the hospital bed, pale, wrapped in blankets, machines humming softly around her. Her eyes opened when he entered. There was no anger in them now. Just exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said, the words breaking free before he could stop them. "I should have listened. I should have stopped. I should never have mocked you." Silence stretched between them. She turned her face slightly away. "I didn't leave to scare you," she said quietly. "I left because I was tired of begging." The truth of it crushed him. "I know," he whispered. "And I don't expect forgiveness. I couldn't lose you." She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free. "You almost did." And for the first time he truly understood that loving her meant more than owning the world outside those hospital walls. The night at the hospital stretched endlessly, measured only by the slow drip of 4 fluids and the quiet hum of machines. He remained seated beside her bed long after visiting hours should have ended, unwilling to move even when a nurse gently suggested he get some rest. Rest felt undeserved. Sleep felt impossible. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow but steady. Each time her eyes fluttered open, they would land on him, and something unreadable would pass between them before she looked away again. It was worse than anger. Anger would have meant she still cared enough to fight. He watched her closely, noticing details he had ignored for years. The faint crease between her brows when she was worried. The way her fingers curled slightly inward even in sleep, as if she were always bracing herself. He wondered how many nights she had lain awake beside him, silently hurting, while he chased power and validation elsewhere. At dawn, the doctor returned to explain the next steps. Observation for 24 hours. Psychological evaluation. Strict instructions that she not be left alone. He agreed to everything without question, nodding like a man being sentenced. When the doctor left, she finally spoke again. "You don't have to stay," she said softly, staring at the ceiling. The words hit him harder than any accusation. "I want to," he replied immediately. She turned her head toward him, studying his face with tired eyes. "That's the problem," she said. "You always want things when it's already broken." He swallowed. She wasn't wrong. "I can't undo what I did," he said quietly. "But I can stop doing it." A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. "You said that before. After the last time I caught you lying." Shame burned through him. He had expected anger. What he hadn't expected was how calm she sounded, how resigned. As if she had already grieved the marriage long before tonight. Later that morning she was cleared to leave. He insisted on driving her home, but she shook her head. "I'm not going back there," she said firmly. The word there echoed in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Their house had never been hers. It had always felt like a place she was allowed to exist, not a place she belonged. He hesitated, then nodded. "Where do you want to go?" She gave him an address. Her sister's. The drive was quiet. Rain streaks still marked the windows, reminders of how close everything had come to ending. He wanted to speak, to apologize again, to promise things he now knew he would have to earn instead. But he stayed silent, afraid of saying the wrong thing. At her sister's apartment, she paused before getting out of the car. "I need space," she said without looking at him. "Not for a day. Not for a week. I don't know how long." His chest tightened, but he forced himself to nod. "I understand." She opened the door, then stopped. "What happened last night," she added, "that doesn't erase everything before it." "I know," he said. She closed the door gently behind her. For the first time in years he went home alone. The house felt hollow without her. Too big. Too quiet. He walked through the rooms slowly, noticing how empty they felt now that she wasn't there to soften them. In the living room he found the gift she had left behind. He picked it up carefully as if it might fall apart in his hands. He didn't open it. Instead he placed it on the table and sat down heavily, staring at it as though it were a verdict. That afternoon he ended the affair. No excuses. No explanations. A single final conversation that ended with him blocking the number and deleting every trace. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary. Then he did something he had avoided his entire life. He made an appointment with a therapist. The days that followed were brutal in their own way. Without her presence, there was nothing to distract him from the consequences of his choices. He attended meetings on autopilot, signed documents without reading them, dismissed men who tried to flatter him or reassure him. None of it mattered. What mattered was the empty passenger seat in his car. The silence in his home. The fact that when his phone buzzed it was never her. He began writing letters he never sent. Pages filled with apologies, with confessions, with truths he had never allowed himself to admit. He wrote about fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of being truly seen, fear that if he slowed down he would have to face how lonely he was. How lonely they both had been. Weeks passed. She didn't contact him. He didn't push. Then one afternoon her sister called. "She's willing to talk," she said cautiously. "Not about reconciliation. Just to be heard." He agreed instantly. They met in a small cafe near the park. Neutral ground. She arrived first, sitting by the window. She looked stronger. Calmer. That scared him more than her tears ever had. He sat across from her, folding his hands together to keep them from shaking. "I'm not here to forgive you," she said plainly. "I'm here because I need you to understand what you did to me." "I'm listening," he said. And she spoke. She talked about nights spent waiting. About feeling invisible. About learning to make herself smaller so she wouldn't be an inconvenience. About how his mocking laughter had convinced her that her emotions were flaws. He didn't interrupt. Didn't defend himself. When she finished, his eyes were wet. "I didn't know how to love you," he said quietly. "But I want to learn. Even if that means learning without you." She studied him for a long moment. "That's the first honest thing you've ever said to me." When they parted that day nothing was fixed. But something had shifted. For the first time the future wasn't about power or control. It was about whether he could become a man worthy of the woman he had nearly lost. The weeks that followed settled into a strange, fragile rhythm. He didn't call. He didn't text. He respected the space she had asked for, even when every instinct in him screamed to break the silence. Instead he focused on the only thing he could control, himself. Therapy was harder than any interrogation he had ever faced. There were no enemies to intimidate, no deals to negotiate. Just questions that peeled him open layer by layer. Why did he dismiss vulnerability as weakness? Why did he seek validation outside his marriage? Why did power feel safer than intimacy? The answers weren't flattering. Meanwhile, she began rebuilding her life away from him. At her sister's apartment, mornings started with quiet routines. Coffee on the balcony, soft music playing while the city woke up. She began sleeping through the night again. The nightmares faded slowly, replaced by a cautious sense of calm. She went back to work part-time. Friends she had drifted away from reached out, surprised but relieved to hear from her. For the first time in years, her world didn't revolve around anticipating his moods or adjusting herself to fit into his life. Still, some nights were harder than others. She would remember the way he used to look at her in the beginning, before power hardened him, before neglect crept in. Those memories hurt, but they no longer broke her. They were reminders of who she had been before she learned to silence herself. He followed the rules he'd set for himself. No showing up uninvited. No grand gestures. Just consistency. He sold one of the properties she had always hated, the one that symbolized everything cold and transactional about his life. He stepped back from certain operations, delegating more than he ever had before. People noticed. Whispers spread. Some mistook it for weakness. He didn't care. One afternoon he opened the gift she had left behind. Inside was a simple watch. Not expensive. Not flashy. On the back, engraved in small letters, were the words, "For when you're ready to come home." The weight of it pressed into his palm like a confession. She hadn't given up on him then. She had believed, longer than he deserved, that one day he would choose her. He wore the watch every day after that. Months passed before she agreed to see him again. This time it was her idea. They met at the same cafe. She looked different, not because of clothes or makeup but because of the way she held herself. Straighter. Grounded. "I'm not the same woman you left standing in the rain," she said after they sat down. "I know," he replied. "And I don't want you to be." She studied him carefully. "And you? Are you different or just quieter?" He didn't rush his answer. "Different," he said finally. "But still learning." She nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. They began meeting occasionally. Conversation stayed focused on honesty, not nostalgia. He listened more than he spoke. When he apologized, he didn't repeat old promises. He acknowledged specific moments, specific wounds. She noticed. There were setbacks. Days when old anger resurfaced. Moments when she questioned whether change could last. But for the first time he didn't grow defensive. He stayed present even when it was uncomfortable. One evening, after a particularly difficult conversation, she stood to leave and hesitated. "I don't know where this is going," she said. "I don't either," he admitted. "But I know where I don't want it to go. Back to who I was." She searched his face, looking for the arrogance she once knew so well. It wasn't there. Trust didn't return all at once. It arrived in fragments. In the way he kept his word. In the way he accepted boundaries without resentment. In the way he showed up emotionally, not just physically. She allowed herself to hope, carefully. The night she finally stepped back into the house, it felt unfamiliar. He had changed it. Softer lighting. Fewer guards. Spaces that felt lived in rather than guarded. "This place feels different," she said quietly. "So do you," he replied. She stayed for dinner. Then for a movie. When she left, it was on her terms. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was slow. Sometimes boring. Often painful. But it was real. And for the first time, both of them understood that love wasn't proven by control or power, but by the ability to listen, to change, and to stay when it would be easier to walk away. The first time she stayed the night again, neither of them slept much. It wasn't because of desire. It was because of everything hanging between them. Unspoken fears, fragile trust, the memory of how easily things had once broken. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, the space between them heavy but intentional. He didn't reach for her. She noticed. In the past, his instinct would have been to close the distance, to claim reassurance through touch. This time he waited, letting her decide. Letting the silence exist without trying to fix it. Sometime near dawn, she turned onto her side and watched him. His face looked softer in sleep, stripped of the sharp control he wore like armor. She wondered how many nights he had spent awake alone while she was gone, staring at the same ceiling she once cried under. When she moved closer, he woke instantly but stayed still. "Is this okay?" she whispered. He nodded, his voice low. "Always." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady, grounded, not demanding anything from her. That was when she realized something quietly terrifying. He missed him. Not the man he had been, but the man he was trying to become. The days that followed felt different. Lighter but still careful. They moved forward without labels, without rushing toward a version of the future that might collapse under expectation. He stopped assuming. Started asking. He asked how her day had been and waited for the real answer. He asked when she needed space. He asked when she needed reassurance. Sometimes she didn't know what she needed, and he accepted that too. There were moments when the past surged back unexpectedly. A careless tone. A missed call. A delayed response. Once when he didn't answer his phone for an hour, panic flared in her chest before she could stop it. Her hands shook as she paced the apartment, memories rushing in uninvited. When he finally called back, she didn't accuse him. She told him the truth. "I got scared," she said quietly. "I know it's not fair. But my body remembers things my mind is trying to forget." He didn't brush it off. Didn't tell her she was overreacting. "I should have texted," he said. "I'm sorry." That simple acknowledgement did something profound. It made her feel safe enough to keep healing. Not every day was progress. There were arguments, real ones this time, not silent wars. But even those were different. Voices were raised, but no one walked away without coming back. No one mocked the other's emotions. No one pretended they didn't care. One night she finally asked the question she'd been avoiding. "Why did you laugh at me that night?" she said softly. "When I was crying." He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. "Because I didn't know how to handle your pain. And instead of admitting that, I tried to shrink it. I tried to make it less real, so I wouldn't have to face what I was doing to you." He swallowed. "It almost broke me." "I know," he said hoarsely. "And I will regret that moment for the rest of my life." She believed him. Not because of his words, but because of how he lived after them. Weeks later she brought the rest of her things back slowly. A few clothes, books, personal items that made the house feel like a shared space instead of a fortress. He didn't hover. Didn't treat her return like a victory. He treated it like a privilege. One afternoon while unpacking she found an old photo of them from years ago. They were younger. Smiling without effort. Before ambition and neglect had hollowed everything out. He showed it to him. "Do you think we can ever be like this again?" He looked at the photo for a long time. Then he shook his head gently. "No," he said. "But I think we can be better. Because now we know what it costs when we aren't careful with each other." She considered that. Then nodded. That night when they finally crossed the distance between them again, it wasn't desperate or rushed. It was slow. Intentional. Built on trust rather than fear. Afterward she lay against him, tracing the lines of the tattoos on his arm, marks of a life he no longer glorified. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. If you ever start choosing power over us again," she said quietly, "tell me. Don't hide it. Don't let me stand alone in the rain ever again." His throat tightened. "I promise." And this time the promise didn't feel like a weapon waiting to be used against her. It felt like a vow grounded in humility. For the first time the future didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like something she could choose. The morning light crept softly into the room, pale and forgiving. She woke before him, lying still as she listened to his breathing. There was comfort in its steadiness now, not tension. Not the sharp awareness she once carried every time she opened her eyes beside him, wondering which version of him she would face. She slipped out of bed quietly and walked toward the window. The city looked the same, busy, indifferent, relentless, but she felt different inside it. Stronger. Awake in a way she hadn't been for a long time. When he joined her, wrapping a robe around his shoulders, she didn't flinch. "Good morning," he said softly. She turned, studying his face. There was no expectation in his eyes. No assumption that everything was suddenly fixed just because she was still there. "Good morning," she replied. They ate breakfast together without rushing. No phones. No interruptions. It felt ordinary, and somehow that felt monumental. Later that day they walked through the park near the cafe where so many difficult conversations had taken place. The trees were greener now, the air warmer. Life had moved forward whether they were ready or not. "I used to think love had to hurt to be real," she said quietly, watching a child chase pigeons across the path. "Like if it didn't break you a little, it didn't matter." He stopped walking. "And now I think love should make room for you," she said. "Not shrink you." He nodded slowly. "I spent my life confusing fear with strength, control with safety." She looked at him. And now I know strength is staying," he said. "Even when it costs me something." That night she made a decision she hadn't planned to make yet. She asked him to come with her, to one of her therapy sessions. Not to speak, just to listen. He agreed without hesitation. In that quiet room she spoke about the night she stood in the rain. About how small she felt. About how his laughter echoed louder than the storm. About how she had stopped believing her feelings mattered. He sat beside her, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. When she finished, he looked broken open in a way no rival had ever managed to do. "I didn't just fail you as a husband," he said when the therapist invited him to speak. "I failed you as a human being." She reached for his hand then, not to comfort him but because she wanted to. Healing didn't erase the past. It changed how it lived inside them. There were still difficult days. Days when guilt crushed him. Days when fear resurfaced in her chest without warning. But they faced those days together, without mockery, without silence. The man he had been, the one who laughed at tears, who dismissed vulnerability, felt distant now. Not erased but understood. A version of himself he no longer defended. Months later they returned to the highway where her phone had been found. It was her idea. The place looked unremarkable in daylight. Just asphalt and grass. No signs of the panic that once lived there. She stepped out of the car, breathing deeply. "This is where I realized I didn't want to disappear," she said. "Not for you. Not for anyone." He stood beside her, saying nothing. "I stayed because I chose myself," she continued. "Not because you begged. Not because you promised. Because I wanted to see if we could become something new." He turned to her then. "And are we?" She considered the question carefully. "We're becoming." That answer was enough. That evening back home she finally opened the gift she had never taken with her. Inside was the watch. The one she had given him. The one he had worn every day since. She fastened it around his wrist again herself. "This time," she said, meeting his eyes, "it's not about coming home. It's about staying present." "I will," he said. "Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then." Their story didn't end with a grand declaration or a perfect future promised in neat lines. It ended with something quieter and far more powerful. Mutual choice. She chose not to disappear. He chose not to look away. And together they chose a love that listened before it spoke, that stayed before it left, and that never again laughed at tears meant to be taken seriously. If this story moved you, leave a comment and share what you felt. Have you ever experienced a moment when your emotions were dismissed? Red heart like this video if you believe tears are never weakness. Bell subscribe and turn on notifications for more emotional, cinematic Mafia romance stories. Speech balloon share this story with someone who needs to understand how silence and mockery can change everything. Some stories are meant to entertain. Others are meant to remind us that feelings matter.